Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fun with Flags. I'm your friendly neighborhood soda, joined as always by my very proud Israeli friend, 50 Shades of Geek.
Right now, the terrorist organization Hamas are hiding under the Gaza tunnels like a bunch of pussies. And me, Yusuf Haddad, is the only Israeli Arab speaking out against them. Right now. Happy Purim, Ramadan Kareem, Salam alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan.
What the fuck did I just witness?
This is my Purim costume. I'm Yusuf Haddad. We talked about him in the.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. I was
Yeah,
like, what the hell?
yeah. He's an Arab that's very proud of being an Israeli, as you can see. That's part of the
Okay.
costume.
I was just like, what the hell did I just get myself into?
You know what? I'll show it to you after the
Oh no, no,
after
no,
the.
no, no, no. Now that you actually told me what's going on, I remember.
All right.
It's just like, oh
At
shit.
least someone got it.
Yeah, it's just because
Someone watching this show got the joke.
when we did that episode, we didn't talk about what he said, did we?
No.
Yeah, so that's why I would never fucking gotten it.
Yeah. I'll show you after the show.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, anyways, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this Frenchness, Canada, and this time. But this time, we're talking about something that I had heard of in passing, but it wasn't until a couple weeks ago where I saw something on Twitter that kind of piqued my interest. It is, which is interesting because it's basically part of my heritage. It is the the Quiet Revolution of Quebec. I have to add of Quebec because you just Google Quiet Revolution and it says other stuff. But yeah, no, basically what it was French Canadians trying to become their own people in a way, is what it was. So I'm just gonna hop right into it because I got some notes. So what I'm gonna do, 50, is I'm just gonna do a brief summary of what the whole thing is, and then I'm just gonna talk about important events. One of them is just gonna be real quick because you've already discussed it. So, all right, you ready?
Go right into it.
So the 1950s tenure of Quebec Premier Maurice Duplessis epitomized the conservative ideal of religiously and culturally pure Quebec and became known among liberals as the Grand Noirceur, or Great Darkness. Although the Richard riot,
His name is Zach Duplessis.
Maurice
Maurice.
Duplessis.
Oh, because it kind of sounds like duplicitous.
No, Duplessis. So I'm gonna try to use say these names in French the way you would in French.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why they might sound a little weird.
Yeah, because if his name was duplicitous, that would kind of be very
But
on the nose.
a little on the nose, yes.
And that's a hell of a nose.
Wow, yeah. Okay, so although the Richard riot of 1955 may have signaled growing submerged forces, soon after, yes,
the Richard riot, is that the one we talked about?
that is the one we talked about. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Soon after Duplessis' death, the June 1960 provincial election installed the Liberal provincial government of Jean Lesage, and the Quiet Revolution began. Prior to the 1960s, the government of Quebec was controlled by the conservative Duplessis, leader of the Union Nationale Party. Not all the Catholic Church supported Duplessis. Some Catholic unions and members of the clergy criticized him, including Montreal Archbishop Joseph Charbonneau. But the bulk of the small town and rural clergy supported him. Now, I should preface this, leading up to the Quiet Revolution, the Catholic Church in Quebec had a stronghold on shit. Like, my dad went to school, nuns were the teachers, like that type of stuff.
Okay.
Right? So, like, they practically ran everything in a way. So the Quiet Revolution was basically in response to that. Some quoted the Union Nationale slogan, "Le ciel est bleu, l'enfer est rouge." The sky or heaven is blue, hell is red, as a reference to the colors of the Union Nationale, blue, and the Liberals, red, the latter accused of being pro-communist. Radio Canada, the newspaper Le Devoir, and political journal C'était Libre were intellectual forums for critics of the Duplessis government. Prior to the Quebec Revolution, the province's natural resources were developed mainly by foreign investors such as the US-based Iron Ore Company of Canada. In the spring of 1949, a group of 5,000 asbestos miners went on strike for 3 months against a foreign corporation. They were supported by Monseigneur Charbonneau, Bishop of Montreal, the Quebecois nationalist newspaper Le Devoir, and a small group of intellectuals. Until the second half of the 20th century, the majority of Francophone Quebec workers lived below the poverty line, and Francophones did not join the executive ranks of the businesses of their own province. So that's basically how my dad grew up, because my dad was born in 1950. Like, he grew up fucking poor. Yeah.
So, quick question though: is it Monseigneur or Monsieur? I've never understood.
So there's Monsieur is Mister, but Monsignor is actually a religious term. It's how you would address an archbishop as Mister, I guess.
Okay.
It is two different words.
But Monsieur does have an N in it.
So Monsieur is the French version of right?
I know that. I'm talking spelling. It's spelled like Monsieur, right?
Yes, MONSEIUR.
So there is an N in there. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, there is. And then Monsignor is spelled MONSIGNOR. There's a G.
G. Okay.
There is a difference, yes.
French is weird.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Political activist and singer Felix Leclerc wrote, "Our people are the water boys of their own country." In many ways, Duplessis' death in 1959, quickly followed by the sudden death of his successor Paul Sauvé, triggered the Quiet Revolution. The Liberal Party, led by Jean Lesage, and campaigning under the slogans "Il faut que ça change" or "Things have to change," and "Maîtres chez nous," masters of our own house, a phrase coined by Le Devoir editor André Laurenzieux, was voted into power within a year of Duplessis' death. So that's how quickly this Jean Lesage died.
Okay.
Yeah. It is generally accepted that the revolution ended before the October crisis of 1970, but Quebec society had continued to change dramatically since then, notably with the rise of the sovereignty government, evidenced by the election of the Souverainist Parti Québécois, first in 1976 by René Lévesque, who I forgot to put a picture of, whatever. The formation of a sovereigntist political party representing Quebec on the federal level. The Bloc Québécois, founded in 1991 by Lucien Bouchard, I actually know that name, and as well as the 1980 and 1995 sovereignty referendums. Some scholars argue that the rise of Quebec's sovereignty movement during the 1970s is also part of this period. All right. So the first major event. So what I did was I actually found a timeline of the major stuff. But the first one is just a quick one. That's because this is considered a precursor in French history. It is the Richard Riot, which we have discussed. Basically, a hockey game between the Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings turned into a riot. Hundreds of Habs fans protested against Clarence Campbell's decision of suspending Maurice Richard. This revealed Quebec's nationalism. But yeah, it's true. Basically, it revealed to the rest of Canada how passionate French people are, French Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Canadian.
Yeah, the Français, Québécois. All right. The Quebec's general election. The 1960 general election was held on June 22nd, 1960, to elect members of the Legislative Assembly of Quebec, Canada. It was one of the most significant elections in Quebec history, rivaled perhaps only by the 1976 general election. The incumbent Union Nationale, led by Antonio Barrette, was defeated by the Quebec Liberal Party, led by Jean Lesage. The 1960 election set the stage for the Quiet Revolution, a major social transformation of all aspects of Quebec society throughout the 1960s. Among many other changes, the influence and power of the Catholic Church fell sharply as Quebec became a secular society. This election put an end to 16 years of continuous Union Nationale rule, much of it under Maurice Duplessis. Duplessis had died in 1959, ending a period that was later derisively referred to as La Grande Noirceur, or the Great Darkness. Duplessis' successor, longtime Minister Paul Sauvé, saw the need to modernize a government that had long been one of the most conservative provincial governments in Canada. He initiated a quote-unquote 100 days of change that began to transform Quebec society. But they were cut short when Sauvé died suddenly after only a few months in office. He was succeeded by another longtime minister, Antonio Barrette. However, with its second new leader in less than a year and its third in less than 2 years and no published platform, the Union Nationale was thus in disarray when it went into the election. So that's one major event. Now, this next one is the one that's the longest because I found this interesting. It is the flag debate. This is basically how Canada got its flag.
So, what was the flag before this?
Good question. Let me quickly find that, actually. Canada's flags.
So you're saying that this led to Canada's flag being
the way it is now, yeah.
Yeah.
And
did the Quebec people wanted their own flag?
So basically, the way this is going to end, spoilers, is Quebec wanted to split off and become its own. Basically, they wanted to move out of the house.
Yeah, I get that. They wanted to become their own country.
Yeah, so basically is what it was. Yeah, so they probably would have kept the fleur-de-lis stuff as the flag. Yeah. But anyways, yeah. Okay, I've got a little. What the? Peter's being weird. There we go. Present. Share screen.
Computer is only as weird as the instructions you give it.
Yeah, of course. So, this is history of Canada's flags right there. So, started off as British, and then we went to the Royal Standard of French Kingdom. Then,
because the British loved putting their flags on everything.
So, basically, because we were, so basically, primarily, it was mostly British.
It lasted all the way till the mid-1960s.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. That can go. Okay. Notes. The Great Canadian Flag Debate, or Great Flag Debate, was a national debate that took place in 1963 and 1964 when a new design of the national flag of Canada was chosen. Although the flag debate has been going on for a long time prior, it officially began on June 15, 1964, when Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson, which is you'll recognize as the name the airport in Toronto, proposed his plans for a new flag in the House of Commons. The debate lasted more than 6 months, bitterly dividing the people in the process. The debate over the proposed new Canadian flag was ended by closure on December 15, 1964. It resulted in the adaptation of the maple leaf as the Canadian national flag, which remains the official national flag of Canada. On June 15, 1964, Pearson opened the parliamentary flag debate with a resolution to establish officially as the flag of Canada a flag embodying the emblem proclaimed by His Majesty King George V on November 21, 1921. 3 maple leaves conjoined on one stem in the colors red and white then designated for Canada. The red leaves occupying a field of white between vertical sections of blue on the edges of the flag. The flag sounded so almost there right off the bat. The flag proposed by Pearson, referred to as the Pearson pennant, was designed by Alan Badeau. Pearson sought to produce a flag which embodied history and tradition, but he also wanted to excise the Union Jack as a reminder of Canada's heritage and links to the United Kingdom. Hence, the issue was not whether the maple leaf was preeminently Canadian, but rather whether the nation should exclude the British-related component from its identity. Diefenbaker led the opposition to the maple leaf flag, arguing for the retention of the Canadian red emblem. Diefenbaker, I just realized is not actually referred to by name, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker.
Hey.
Diefenbaker led the opposition to the modern maple leaf flag, arguing for the retention of the Canadian red ensign. Diefenbaker and his lieutenants mounted a filibuster. The seemingly endless debate raged on in Parliament and the press with no side giving quarter. Pearson forced members of Parliament to stay over the summer, but that did not help. On September 10th, 1964, the Prime Minister yielded to the suggestion that the matter be referred to a special flag committee. The key member of the 15-person committee, Liberal Member of Parliament John Matheson, said that they were asked to produce a flag for Canada in 6 weeks. On September 10, on the same date, a committee of 15 members of parliament were announced. It was made up of 7 Liberals, 5 Conservatives, and 1 each from the New Democratic Party, or the NDP, the Social Credit Party, who I've never heard of, and the Raymond Crédit, who I've also never heard of. The Conservatives at first saw this event as a victory, but I just noticed nice.
Thank you, finally. My arm's getting tired.
Well, I've been looking at the notes. I'm sorry. Okay. The Conservatives at first saw this event as a victory, for they knew that all previous flag committees had suffered miscarriages. That is quite a word to use in Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah.
I should have fucking edited that. Holy shit.
That's why I keep telling you, always proofread before you run this.
I apologize for anybody watching. I did not catch that. That was fucking a mistake. I'm sorry. Anyways, during the next 6 weeks, the committee held 35 lengthy meetings. Thousands of suggestions also poured in from a public engaged in what had become a great Canadian debate about identity and how best to represent it. 3,541 entries were submitted. Many contained common elements. 2,136 contained maple leafs. 408 contained Union Jacks. 389 contained beavers, and 359 contained fleur-de-lis.
Yeah, I was going to ask you when does the fleur-de-lis enters the picture.
That's actually not part of this debate, of this story.
Okay.
The fleur-de-lis flag has been around for longer than this.
Yeah, because it's right up there.
Yeah, it's just this. So I use this picture because I've never seen it before, but it just shows Quebec splitting off from the rest of the country. That's why it's up there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. At the last minute, John Matheson slipped a flag designed by historian George Stanley into the mix. The idea came to him while standing in front of the Mackenzie building of the Royal Military College of Canada while viewing the college flag flying in the wind. Stanley submitted a March 23, 1964 formal detailed memorandum to Matheson on the history of Canada's emblems, predating Pearson's raising the issue, in which he warned that any new flag, quote, must avoid the use of national or racial symbols that are of a divisive nature, end quote, and that it would be clearly, quote unquote, clearly inadvisable to create a flag that carried either Union Jack or fleur-de-lis. The design put forward had a simple red maple leaf on a plain white background flanked by 2 red borders based on the design of the flag of the Royal Military College. The voting was held on October 22, 1964, when the committee's final contest pitted Pearson's pennant against Stanley's. Assuming that the Liberals would vote for the Prime Minister's design, the Conservatives backed Stanley. They were outmaneuvered by the Liberals, who had agreed with others to choose the Stanley maple leaf flag. The Liberals voted for the red and white flag, making the selection unanimous 15-0. Well, so that's how we got this flag. So while the committee had made its decision, the House of Commons had not. Diefenbaker would not budge, so the debate continued for 6 weeks as the Conservatives launched a filibuster. The debate became so ugly that the Toronto Star called it the Great Flag Farce. The debate was prolonged until one of Diefenbaker's own senior members, Leon Balser, and the Créditiste Léal Coué, fuck off with these French names sometimes, advised the government to cut off the debate by applying closure. Pearson did so, and after some 250 speeches, the final vote adapting the Stanley flag took place at 2:15 on the morning of December 15th, 1964, 5 days after my dad's 14th birthday, with Balser and the other Francophone Conservatives swinging behind the Liberals. The committee's recommendation was adapted 163-78. At 2 a.m., immediately after the successive vote, Matheson wrote to Stanley, "Your proposed flag has now just been approved by the Commons, 163-78. Congratulations. I believe it is an excellent flag that will serve Canada well." Diefenbaker, however, called it a flag by closure imposed by closure. On the afternoon of December 15th, the Commons also voted in favor of continued use of the Union flag as an official flag to symbolize Canada's allegiance to the Crown and its membership of the Commonwealth of Nations. Senate approval followed on December 17, 1964. The Union Jack, or the Royal Union flag, as it would be officially termed in a parliamentary resolution, would be put alongside the new flag at federal government buildings, federally operated airports, military installations, at the masthead of Royal Canadian Navy ships within Canadian waters, and at other appropriate establishments on Commonwealth Day, Victoria Day, December 11th, which is the anniversary of the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, 1931, and when otherwise instructed to do so by the National Defense Headquarters. And that is the history of Canada's flag.
Oh, now, is the flag still the five-sided leaf?
No, so that has actually changed as well. I will bring up
Something more like this, then?
Yes, closer to that. I will bring up a quick picture. There we go. And I should keep forgetting how to. That is what it is. Less crude. Less crude.
Yeah. The five-sided thing really kind of threw me off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just like for hockey too. The Toronto Maple Leafs flag used to look like that as well, but now the leaf on it actually looks like the Canadian flag. But same thing. You look at those old ones, and your mind breaks a little bit.
Like this with the.
That is actually a really good representation. Okay. Next up is a little bit on Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who's actually the father of our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. The name kind of gives it away.
Yeah. So from the late 1960s until the mid-1980s, Trudeau's personality dominated the political scene to an extent never before seen in Canadian political life. After his appointment as Prime Minister, he won the 1968, 1972, and 1974 elections before narrowly losing in 1979. He won a fourth election victory shortly afterwards in 1980 and eventually retired from politics shortly before the 1984 election. Trudeau is the most recent Prime Minister to win 4 elections, having won three majority governments and 1 minority government, and to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. His tenure of 15 years and 164 days make him Canada's 3rd longest-serving Prime Minister behind John A. Macdonald and William Lyon Mackenzie King. Despite his personal motto, reason before passion, Trudeau's personality and policy decisions aroused polarizing reactions, which is, although throughout Canada during his time in office, now I will say is still polarizing.
Okay.
It is still something that is brought up, like that. He fucked us up. It's like, shut the fuck up. We're doing all right. Yeah. While critics accused him of arrogance, of economic mismanagement, and of unduly centralizing Canadian decision-making to the detriment of the culture of Quebec and the economy of the prairies, admirers praised what they considered to be the force of his intellect and his political acumen that maintained national unity over the Quebec sovereignty movement. Trudeau suppressed the 1970 Quebec terrorist crisis by controversially invoking the War Measures Act, the third and last in Canadian history that the act was brought into force. In addition, Quebec's proposal to negotiate a sovereignty association agreement with the federal government was overwhelmingly rejected in the 1980 Quebec referendum. In a bid to move the Liberal Party towards economic nationalism, Trudeau's government oversaw the creation of Petro-Canada and launched the National Energy Program. The latter generated uproar in oil-rich Western Canada. Well, let me paraphrase that. And Alberta and the prairies. BC probably didn't give 2 shits.
Okay.
They always lump us in with those fucking weirdos. Leading to what many coined Western alienation. In other domestic policy, Trudeau pioneered official bilingualism and multiculturalism, fostering a pan-Canadian identity. Trudeau's foreign policy included making Canada more independent. He patrioted the Constitution and established the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, actions that achieved full Canadian sovereignty. He formed close ties with the Soviet Union, China, and Cuban leader Fidel Castro, putting him at odds with other capitalist Western nations. Now, what's actually funny about the Castro thing is there is a rumor that Justin Trudeau is actually Fidel Castro's kid because there are some facial similarities.
Okay, conspiracy.
Yes. Like, I've actually seen people break it down. It's fucking wild.
You don't really believe that, do you?
I know who Justin Trudeau's mom is, so yes. She used to fuck the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
Like she was a well-known partier. So it
She got around.
possible.
Okay.
It's
So it's
plausible.
possible then.
It is, yes. All right. The Official Language Act. The Official Language Act, in French, le sur les langues officielles, is a Canadian law that came into force on September 9th, 1969, which gives French and English equal status in the Government of Canada. This makes them official languages, having preferred status in law over any other languages. Although the Official Languages Act is not the only piece of federal language law, it is the legislative keystone of Canada's official bilingualism. It was substantially amended in 1988. Both languages are equal in Canada's government and in all the services it controls, such as the courts. The Act provides, among other things, that Canadians have the right to receive services from federal departments and from crown corporations in both official languages, that Canadians will be able to be heard before federal courts in the official language of their choice, that Parliament will adapt laws and to publish regulations in both official languages, and that both versions will be of equal legal weight, that English and that English and French will have equal status of languages of work within the federal public service within geographically defined parts of the country that are designated bilingual, most notably in the National Capital Region, Montreal, and New Brunswick, as well as in certain overseas government offices and in parts of the country where there is sufficient demand for services in both official languages. In remaining geographical areas, the language of work for federal public servants is French in Quebec and English elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The War Measures Act. The War Measures Act was a statute of the Parliament of Canada that provoked the declaration of war, invasion, and insurrection, and the types of emergency measures that could thereby be taken. The act was brought into force 3 times in Canadian history: during the First World War, during the Second World War, and the 1970 October Crisis. The act was questioned for its suspension of civil liberties and personal freedoms, including only for Ukrainians and other Europeans during Canada's first national internment operations of 1914 to 1920, the Second World War's Japanese-Canadian internment, and the October Crisis. In 1988, it was repealed and replaced by the Emergencies Act. But the reason I'm not going to go much into that is because I actually plan on doing the October Crisis as a topic at some point.
Okay, because I was wondering when we're going to get into that.
So that's actually something I want to do that as a separate topic because I actually don't know about this. I've never heard of it, so I want to learn about it.
But it turns out you also have an October Crisis.
Yeah.
Even before we did.
Yeah, never fucking knew. Unless it actually might have to do with this next topic. James Cross was kidnapped by the FLQ. On October 5th, 1970, James Cross, an Irish-born British diplomat who served in India, Malaysia, and Canada, was abducted at gunpoint from his British diplomatic residence at 1297 Redpath Crescent in the Golden Square Mile district of Montreal and held as a hostage for 2 months as the FLQ make a series of demands to the Quebec government. And I just realized this is probably the same fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably why they did the War Measures Act. Sorry?
Whoopsie.
Yep. During captivity, due to lack of food, Cross lost 10 kilograms or 22 pounds. He was released on December 3rd after 60 days in captivity. In exchange for his release, his abductors would get safe passage to Cuba. The talks were held at the Canadian Pavilion located on the Notre Dame Island, the site of Expo 67. This site was declared Cuban territory for the period of the talks. 6 members of the FLQ's Liberation Cell were later convicted of Cross's kidnapping when they returned to Canada during the late 1970s. They received custodial sentences ranging from 12 to 24 months. Cross said of his kidnapping, they told me that around 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening that the police knew where I was. Nothing much happened for about the next 4 hours. Then the power was cut at, I think, around 2 in the morning. I was in bed at the time. They got me up. They handcuffed me. They took me into a corridor in the middle of the house. They handcuffed me to a doorknob, and I spent the night. It's a very uncomfortable position. On the 40th anniversary of the day that sparked the October Crisis in 2010, Cross agreed to speak to Radio Canada's CBC Radio's The Current about the events surrounding his kidnapping. There's also a transcript of a taped memoir online uploaded by Churchill College. So I am actually going to do more research into this and actually do a proper topic on that, because that sounds like fucking wild. All right. Next up is the James Bay Project. The James Bay Project, in French, Projet de la Baie James, refers to the construction of a series of hydroelectric power stations on the La Grande River in northwestern Quebec, Canada, by state-owned utility Hydro-Quebec, and the diversion of neighboring rivers into La Grande watershed. Now, just out of curiosity, do you know what hydroelectricity is?
Is it where that process where the flow of the water is what creates electricity, like windmills
Yeah.
and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
yeah, pretty cool.
And apparently I do.
Yeah. It is located between James Bay to the west and Labrador to the east, and its waters flow from the Laurentine Plateau of the Canadian Shield. The project covers an area the size of New York State and is one of the largest hydroelectric systems in the world. It has cost upwards of $20 billion to build and has an installed generating capacity of 15,244 megawatts at the cost of 7,000 square miles of pre-hunting lands. If fully expanded to include all of the original planned dams as well as the additional James Bay 2 projects, the system would generate a total of 27,000 megawatts, making it the largest hydroelectric system in the world. It has been built since 1974 by James Bay Energy for Hydro-Quebec. The development of the James Bay project led to an acrimonious conflict with the 5,000 Crees and 4,000 Inuit of northern Quebec over land rights, lifestyle, and environmental issues. A ruling against the Quebec government in 1973 forced the Robert Bourassa government to negotiate a far-reaching agreement, the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, involving the Cree, the Inuit, the Quebec and Canadian governments, Hydro-Canada, the SEBJ, not sure what that means, and later the Naskapi First Nations. In the 1990s, forceful opposition by the Crees and their environmental allies caused the cancellation of the Great Whale Project, a proposed 3,000 megawatt complex north of La Grande River. In February 2002, the Bernard Landry government and the Grand Council of the Crees signed the Peace of the Braves, or in French, Paix des Braves, and the Bomhonan Agreement, establishing a new relationship between Quebec and the Crees and agreeing on environmental rules for the construction of 3 new power stations built between 2003 and 2011. The East Main 1, East Main 1A, and Sarcelle generating stations, and the diversion of the Rupert River. Oof. So, well, let me take a drink. What do you think so far?
It seems like it's more of an industrial revolution than a. So far, I'm not really getting the whole. The Quebecians wanted to split off and be their own thing.
That's actually coming up next. Not next, but the one after. Okay. That's when we start talking about the Parti Québécois and the referendums briefly. So, getting there. Because the splitting didn't happen right off the bat. All right. The Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. The Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, or in French, Charte des droits de liberté et de la personne, also known as the Quebec Charter, is a statutory bill of rights and human rights code based on the National Assembly of Quebec on June 27, 1975. It received royal assent from Lieutenant Governor Hugues Lapointe, I guess, coming into effect on June 20th, 1976. Introduced by the Liberal government of Robert Bourassa, the charter followed extensive preparatory work that began under the Union National government of Daniel Johnson. The charter, which is a French name if I ever heard one, the charter recognizes that every person on the territory of Quebec is equal in value and in dignity. Since the charter aims to guarantee human rights and to harmonize the relations between citizens and institutions, the charter binds the state, legislative, executive, administrative, and applies to private law relations between persons. The charter also establishes the Commission des droits de la personne et des droits de jeunesse, also known as Human Rights and Youth Rights Commission, also known by its acronym CDPDJ, charged to promote and apply the charter, and the Human Rights Tribunal of Quebec. All right, now we're into the separatist shit.
Hey!
Parti Québécois. The 1976 Quebec general election was held on November 15th, 1976, to elect members to National Assembly of the Province of Canada, Quebec. It was one of the most significant elections in Quebec history, rivaled only by the 1960 general election, and caused major repercussions in the rest of Canada. The Parti Québécois, led by René Lévesque, this guy, defeated the incumbent Quebec National Party, led by Premier Robert Bourassa. The Parti Québécois used its term in office to introduce numerous bills to implement its agenda. The first bill introduced in the new session of the National Assembly was legislative to confirm French as the sole official language of Quebec, and to implement measures to make this a social reality. The legislative number of this bill, Bill 1, was intended to signify the importance of the bill for the new government. The bill was withdrawn and significantly altered, however, and was eventually reintroduced as Bill 101, or La Loi 101 in French, also known as the Charter of the French Language. With some modifications, the Charter of the French Language remains in effect today and has shaped modern Quebec society in far-reaching ways. The 1976 election also set the stage for the 1980 referendum of the province of Quebec's proposal to political independence in an economic union with the rest of Canada called Sovereignty Association. The proposal was soundly defeated in the referendum. The 1980 referendum. The Quebec referendum of 1980 on the Parti Québécois government plans for Sovereignty Association was held in fulfillment of a promise that the party had made to do so during the 1976 election campaign that brought it to power. In this referendum, the government asked the people of Quebec to give it a mandate to, quote, negotiate a new constitutional agreement with the rest of Canada based on the equality of nations. When the votes were counted, nearly 60% of Quebecers had voted against this plan, and it was thereby rejected. If the yes side had won, the results of the negotiations would have been submitted to a second referendum. The 1980 referendum was followed by constitutional negotiations that have left an indelible mark on the Canadian political scene. The province-wide referendum took place on May 20th, and the proposal to pursue secession was defeated by 59.56% to 40.44% margin. This is something that I do plan on also doing discussions as well. So,
okay.
Now this next one, the 1995 referendum, I actually remember kind of. I do remember talk about Quebec splitting off, and I didn't really understand it at the time because I would have been 8. So the 1995 Quebec referendum was the second referendum to ask voters in the predominantly French-speaking Canadian province of Quebec whether Quebec should proclaim sovereignty and become an independent country, with the condition precedent of offering a political and economic agreement to Canada. The culmination of multiple years of debate and planning after the failure of the Meech Lake and Charlottetown constitutional accords, the referendum was launched by the provincial Parti Québécois government of Jacques Parizeau. Despite initial predictions of a heavy sovereigntist defeat, an eventful and complex campaign followed, with the, quote, yes side flourishing after being taken over by Bloc Québécois Lucien Bouchard. Voting took place on October 30th, 1995, and featured the largest voter turnout in Quebec's history, 93.52% of the population that could vote. The no option carried by a margin of 54,288 votes, receiving 50.58% of the vote being cast. Parizeau, who announced his pending resignation as Quebec Premier the following day, later stated that he would have quickly proceeded with a unilateral declaration of independence had the result been affirmative and negotiations failed or been refused, the latter of which was later revealed as the federal position in the event of a yes victory. This is the 1995 one. I forgot to bring it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it. Like I said, those last two things, those two actually deserve their own thing as well, because they're important events in Canadian history. So that's it for me today.
Hey.
All right. So what is for you next week?
Well, this is gonna be a very controversial topic, but it somehow, in a way, kind of related to what to your topic, the one you just talked about today. So it's something that I've mentioned in passing in previous episodes of the show. But for the most part, it's really gonna come in handy as a sort of prelude to another topic that I've got cooking for the
quite the
show.
build-up.
I'm planning. What?
That's quite the buildup.
Yeah, it's a. See, that's how I do things. I build things up. All right. So, what I'm planning on doing is having this topic lead up to another topic, and of course, the topic that I'm referring to right now for next week is Israeli politicians. To be
Oh,
more specific, prime ministers, presidents, and you know what? Just for fun, let's also throw in um, general chief of staffs because it's weird how all these three topics sort of blend together
mm-hmm.
in amongst themselves. And you'll notice that very quickly once we get to that. So I guess you can call it Israeli leaders, but for all intents and purposes, let's call it the prime ministers for now.
All right. Right on. All right, so you can find me in my personal Instagram and Twitter at soda_the_saxman, as well as on the Northern Entertainment Group here doing just my usual shenanigans with this guy, 50 Shades of Geek.
Yes, and you can also find me and you can find me doing some of those shenanigans with my good friend Soda on this show every Thursday, and on Monday every Monday on the greatest show in the galaxy, where I and a guest, usually Soda himself, talk about the greatest show in the galaxy, Doctor Who. And you can also check me out on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek, where I talk even more Doctor Who. I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way to 2023, and I also do daily, and yes, daily, every day, a different reaction video to all of the Eurovision songs for the upcoming Eurovision in 2024. So yeah, it's been a hell of a project, and I'm so happy I'm along for the ride. And you can also check out all the other wonderful channels on the wider Benverse at large, such as Something to Talk About, So Taking Wrestling, if that's even still a thing, Galaxy Geeks, Multiverse of Geekdom, Below Tonight, The Midnight Cinema, 8-10 Reviews, and In the Front Row, still on this thumbnail. And you want to do the bed thing?
Yeah, and of course we always do this for this guy, our friend, the head geek himself, Ben Rayner, who we still miss every day. I've been thinking about lately just because of some things have been reminding me of him.
His birthday's coming up soon.
Yeah, it's right. His birthday. It's fucking hilarious. His birthday is on April Fool's Day. Like, oh, it's too funny. Anyways, yeah. So as always, we do it for this guy. We basically named this show because he likes the show Big Bang Theories, and there is a show in there called Fun with Flanks. So basically, he's the patron saint of this show. So on behalf of myself and 50, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. So long.
Always let your geek flag fly. That's all we're really here for.
Amen, brother. See you later.
Right now!